everyone, I'm Miss Mary Beth. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at Ingalls Memorial Library in Rindge, and I'm here today for Armchair Adventures. And that's our series where every day we read a little bit of a book, and eventually we finish a whole book together. And the book we're reading right now is The Princess and the Goblin. And I think we're almost done. We've read a lot so far, and a lot has happened. It's about our Princess Irene, and her friend Curdy. Irene is 8, and she's a princess who lives in a castle, and below the castle there are goblins in the mines. And Curdy works in the mines. And he's very brave, and he knows that there's some kind of bad plot against the king. And he found out that he worked very hard, and he found out that the plot that the goblins have is that they want to force Princess Irene to marry their prince, the Goblin Prince. So he just found out about that plot. So Curdy is trying really hard to make sure that does not happen. And Princess Irene is very brave too, and she has a very nice great-great-grandmother who's magic. Not everybody can see her. Curdy can't see her. She's magic and kind of mysterious, and we don't know very much about her. So Irene has kind of been trying to find out who this lady is, and this lady's been very nice to her. And Curdy has been trying to find out what the plot is. And he found out what the bad plan is. So now they have to stop it from happening. So that was where we left off. So today's chapter is called Chapter 24. Irene Behaves Like a Princess. When the princess awoke from the sweetest of sleeps, she found her nurse bending over her, the housekeeper looking over the nurse's shoulder, and the laundry maid looking over the housekeeper's. The room was full of servants, and the gentlemen at arms, with a long column of servants behind them, were peeping or trying to peep in the door of the nursery. Because she was missing, so everyone in the castle was looking for her. "Are those horrid creatures gone?" asked the princess, remembering first what had terrified her in the morning. "You naughty little princess!" cried Ludi, her nurse. Her face was very pale with red streaks in it, and she looked as if she were going to shake her. But Irene said nothing. She only waited to hear what should come next. "How could you get under the clothes like that and make us all fancy you were lost? And keep it up all day, too. You are the most stubborn child. It's anything but fun to us, I can tell you." It was the only way the nurse could account for Irene's disappearance all day. So they thought she was hiding under the laundry? "I didn't do that, Ludi," said Irene. "Don't tell stories," cried her nurse. "I shall tell you nothing at all," said Irene. "That's just as bad," said the nurse. "Just as bad to say nothing at all as to tell stories," exclaimed the princess. "I will ask my papa about that. He won't say so, and I don't think he would like you to say so." "Tell me directly what you mean by that," screamed the nurse, half wild with anger at the princess, and fright at the possible consequences to herself and her job. "When I tell you the truth, Ludi," said the princess, who somehow did not feel at all angry, "you say to me, 'Don't tell stories,' and it seems I must tell stories before you will believe me." "You are very rude, princess," said the nurse. "You are so rude, Ludi, that I will not speak to you again till you are sorry. Why should I, when I know you will not believe me?" returned the princess. For she did know perfectly well that if she were to tell Ludi what she had been doing, the more she went on to tell her, the less Ludi would believe her. That's the problem, is nobody believes Irene. "You are the most provoking child," cried her nurse. "You deserve to be well punished for your wicked behavior." "Please, Miss Housekeeper," said the princess, "will you take me to your room and keep me there till my king papa comes? I will ask him to come up as soon as he can." Everyone stopped at these words. Up to this moment, they had all regarded her as little more than a baby. They were seeing her more as a child, weren't they? But the housekeeper was afraid of the nurse, and sought to patch matters up, and said, "I'm sure, Princess, Nursey did not mean to be rude to you. I do not think my papa would wish me to have a nurse who spoke to me as Ludi does. If she thinks I tell lies, she had better either say so to my papa or go away. Sir Walter, will you take charge of me?" "With the greatest of pleasures, Princess," answered the captain of the gentlemen-at-arms soldiers, walking with his great stride into the room. The crowd of servants made eager way for him, and he bowed low before the little princess's bed. "I shall send my servant at once, on the fastest horse in the stable, to tell your king papa that your royal highness desires his presence. When you have chosen one of these under-servants to wait upon you, I shall order the room to be cleared." "Thank you very much, Sir Walter," said the princess, and her eye glanced toward a rosy-cheeked girl who had lately come to the house as a maid. But when Ludi saw the eyes of her dear princess going in search of another instead of her, Ludi fell upon her knees by the bedside of Irene and burst into a great cry of distress. I think, Sir Walter, said Irene, I will keep Ludi, but I put myself under your care, and you need not trouble my king, Papa, until I speak to you again. Will you all please go away? I am quite safe and well, and I did not hide myself for the sake either of amusing myself or of troubling my people. Ludi, will you please dress me? And that was the end of chapter 24. That was a fast chapter. I guess Irene is becoming more confident and more sure of herself and acting more like a princess. She's commanding everybody to do things. She's taking charge. Chapter 25 is called Curdie Comes to Grief. Oh no. Everything was for some time quiet above ground. The king was still away in a distant part of his dominions. The men-at-arms kept watching about the house. They had been considerably astonished by finding at the foot of the rock in the garden the hideous body of the goblin creature that Curdie had killed. But they came to the conclusion that it had been slain in the mines and had crept out there to die. And except an occasional glimpse of a live one, they saw nothing to cause alarm. Curdie kept watching in the mountain, and the goblins kept burrowing deeper into the earth. As long as they went deeper, there was, Curdie judged, no immediate danger. To Irene, the summer was as full of pleasure as ever, and for a long time, although she often thought of her grandmother during the day, and often dreamed about her at night, she did not see her grandmother. The kids and the flowers were as much her delight as ever, and she made much friendship with the miners' children she met on the mountain as Ludi would permit. But Ludi had very foolish notions concerning the dignity of a princess, not understanding that the truest princess is just the one who loves all her brothers and sisters best, and who is most able to do them good by being humble towards them. At the same time, she was considerably altered for the better in her behavior to the princess. Ludi could not keep seeing that she was no longer a child, but wiser than her age would account for. She kept foolishly whispering to the servants, however, sometimes that the princess was not right, in her mind, sometimes that she was too good to live, and other nonsense of the same sort. All this time, Curdie had to be sorry, without a chance of confessing, that he had behaved so unkindly to the princess. This perhaps made him the more diligent in his endeavors to serve her. His mother and he often talked on the subject, and she comforted him, and told him she was sure he would some day have the opportunity he so much desired. He still wanted to apologize, right? Remember? He didn't believe the princess when she said that her great-great-grandmother was there. Here, I should like to remark, for the sake of the princess and princesses in general, that it is a low and contemptible thing to refuse to confess to a fault, or even an error. If a true princess has done wrong, she is always uneasy until she has had an opportunity of throwing the wrongness away from her by saying, I did it, and I wish I had not, and I am sorry for having done it. So you see, there is some ground for supposing that Curdie was not a miner only, but a prince as well. Many such instances have been known in the world's history. So the narrator is saying that it's best if we own up to our faults and admit to our mistakes and apologize. I think that's a good lesson. But he's saying that princesses do that a lot. And since Curdie wants to do that, is he a prince? I don't know. Let's find out. At length, however, Curdie began to see signs of a change in the proceedings of the goblin excavators. They were going no deeper, but had commenced running on a level, and he watched them, therefore, more closely than ever. All at once, one night, coming to a slope of very hard rock, they began to ascend along the inclined plane of its surface. Having reached its top, they went again on a level for a night or two, after which they began to ascend once more, and kept on at a pretty steep angle. At length, Curdie judged it time to transfer his observation to another quarter, and the next night he did not go to the mine at all, but, leaving his pickaxe and a clue at home, and taking only his usual lumps of bread and peas pudding, Curdie went down the mountain to the king's house. He climbed over the wall, and he remained in the garden the whole night, creeping on hands and knees from one spot to the other, and lying at full length with his ear on the ground, listening. But Curdie heard nothing except the tread of the men-at-arms as they marched about, whose observation, as the night was cloudy and there was no moon, he had little difficulty in avoiding. For several following nights he continued to haunt the garden and listen, but with no such success. At length, early one morning, whether it was that he got careless of his own safety, or that the growing moon had become strong enough to expose him, his watching came to a sudden end. He was creeping from behind the rock where the stream ran out, for he had been listening all around it in the hope it might convey to his ear some indication of the whereabouts of the goblin miners, when, just as he came into the moonlight on the lawn, a whiz in his ear and a blow upon his leg startled him. Curdie instantly squatted in the hope of eluding further notice. But when he heard the sound of running feet, he jumped up to take the chance of escape by flight. He fell, however, with a keen shout of pain, for the bolt of a crossbow had wounded his leg, and the blood was now streaming from it. Curdie was instantly laid hold of by 2 or 3 of the men-at-arms. It was useless to struggle, so he submitted in silence. "It's just a boy!" cried several of the men-at-arms, in a tone of amazement. "I thought it was one of those demons." "What are you about here? What are you doing here?" "I'm going to have a little rough usage, apparently," said Curdie, laughing as the men shook him. "Impertinence will do you no good. You have no business here in the king's grounds, and if you don't give a true account of yourself, you will fare as a thief." "Why, what else could he be here for?" said one man-at-arms. "It might have been after a lost kid, you know," suggested another. "I see no good in trying to excuse him. He has no business here, anyhow." "Let me go away, then, if you please," said Curdie. "But we don't please," said the men. "Not except to give a good account of yourself." "I don't feel quite sure whether I can trust you," said Curdie. "We are the king's own men-at-arms," they answered. But the captain was taken with Curdie's appearance and courage. "Well, I will tell you all about it, if you will promise to listen to me and not do anything rash." "I call that cool," said one of the party. "He will tell us what mischief he was about if we promise to do as pleases him." "But I was about no mischief," Curdie answered. But before he could say more, he turned faint, and he fell senseless upon the grass. Then first they discovered that the bolt they had shot, taking him for one of the goblins, had wounded him. Oh, so the guards didn't know Curdie was hurt. I'm glad they discovered that. The guards carried him into the house and laid him down in the hall. The report spread that they had caught a robber, and the servants crowded in to see the villain. Amongst them came the nurse. The moment she saw him, she exclaimed, "I declare it's the same young rascal of a miner that was rude to me and the princess on the mountain." He wasn't rude. He actually wanted to kiss the princess. I took good care of that, and he was prowling about. Was he? Just like his impudence. The princess, being fast asleep, could not allow Ludi, could not change... Sorry. The princess, being fast asleep, was not there to defend Curdie. When the captain heard this, although he had considerable doubt of its truth, he resolved to keep Curdie a prisoner till they could search into the affair. Do you remember? The princess, Irene, wanted to kiss Curdie on the cheek and thank him for rescuing them, but Curdie was the one who said, "No, that's not proper." Well, Ludi said it too, I guess. But it was Irene who wanted to. So, after they brought Curdie around a little, and attended to his wound, which was rather bad, they laid him, still exhausted, upon a mattress in a disused room, and they locked the door and left him. Curdie passed a troubled night, and in the morning they found him talking wildly. In the evening he came to himself, but he felt very weak, and his leg was painful. Wondering where he was, and seeing one of the men-at-arms in the room, Curdie began to question him, and soon recalled the events of the preceding night. As he was himself unable to watch any more, he told the soldier all he knew about the goblins, and begged him to tell his companions, and stir them up to watch with tenfold vigilance. But, whether it was that he did not talk quite coherently, or that the whole thing appeared incredible, certainly the man concluded that Curdie was only raving still, and he tried to tell him to hold his tongue. This, of course, annoyed Curdie dreadfully, who now felt, in his turn, what it was to not be believed, and the consequence was that his fever returned. And by the time when, at his present entreaties, the captain was called, there could be no doubt that Curdie was raving. They did for him what they could, and promised everything he wanted, but with no intention of fulfillment. At last Curdie went to sleep, and when at length his sleep grew profound and peaceful, they left him, locked the door again, and withdrew, intending to revisit him early in the morning. Oh no! Poor Curdie! He can't even tell him what's going on. He's in a lot of pain, isn't he? Well, that was the end of chapter 5. Chapter 26 is the Goblin Miners. That same night, several of the servants were having a chat together before going to bed. "What can that noise be?" said one of the housemaids, who had been listening for a moment or two. "I heard it the last 2 nights," said the cook. "If there were any about the place, I should have taken it for rats, but Tom keeps them far away enough." I've heard enough. "I've heard, though," said the scullery maid, "that rats move about in companies sometimes. There may be an army of them invading us. I heard the noises yesterday, and today too." "That'll be grand fun then, for my Tom and Miss Housekeeper's Bob," said the cook. "They'll be friends for once in their lives, and fight on the same side. I'll engage Tom and Bob together to put to fight any number of rats." "It seems to me," said the nurse, "that the noises are much too loud for that. I have heard them all day. And my princess has asked me several times what they can be. Sometimes they sound like distant thunder, and sometimes the noises you hear in the mountains. It sounds like the noises you hear in the mountains from those horrid miners below. I shouldn't wonder, said the cook, if it was the miners after all. They may have come on some hole in the mountain through which the noises reach to us. They're always boring and blasting and breaking, you know. As he spoke, there came a great rolling rumble beneath them, and the house quivered. They all started up in a fright, and rushed into the hall and found the gentlemen at arms in fright too. They had sent to awake their captain, who said from their description that it must have been an earthquake, an occurrence which, although very rare in that country, had taken place almost within the century. And then they went to bed again, strange to say, and they all fell fast asleep, without once thinking of Curdie, or associating the noises they had heard with what he had told them. He had not believed Curdie. If the captain had, he would have at once have thought of what he had said, and would have taken precautions. As the group heard nothing more, they concluded that Sir Walter was right, and that the danger was over for perhaps another 100 years. The fact, as discovered afterwards, was that the goblins had, in working up a second sloping face of stone, had arrived at a huge block which lay under the cellars of the house. It was so round that when they succeeded, after hard work, in dislodging it without blasting, it rolled thundering down the slope with a jarring, bounding roll, which shook the foundations of the house. The goblins were themselves dismayed at the noise, for they knew, by careful spying and measuring, that they must now be quite very near to their house, and they feared giving everyone an alarm. Therefore they remained quiet for a while, and when they began to work again, they no doubt thought themselves very fortunate in coming upon a vein of sand which filled a winding fissure in the rock on which the house was built. By scooping this away, they came out in the king's wine cellar. The goblins are in the house! No sooner did they find out where they were than they scurried back again, and running at full speed into the goblin palace, announced their success to the king and queen with shouts of triumph. In a moment, the goblin royal family and the whole goblin people were on their way in haste to the king's house, each eager to have a share in the glory of carrying off that same night the Princess Irene. The queen went stumping along in one shoe of stone and one of skin. This could not have been pleasant. My readers may wonder that, with such skillful working men about her, she had not yet replaced the shoe that was carried off by Curdie. As the king, however, had more than one ground of objection to her stone shoes, he no doubt took advantage of the discovery of her toes, and he threatened to expose her deformity if she had another shoe made. I presume he insisted on her being content with skin shoes, and allowed her to wear the remaining granite one on the present occasion only because she was going out to war. They soon arrived in the king's wine cellar, and regardless of its huge vessels, of which they did not know the use, they proceeded at once, but as quietly as they could, to force open the door that led upwards. And that is the end of chapter 26. My goodness. The goblins are in the house. Join me tomorrow to find out what happens. Do you think they're going to get rid of the goblins? Do you think the goblins are going to take away Princess Irene? I don't know. Join me tomorrow for more Armchair Adventures. Thanks for reading with me.